one of the cool things about what the last year has been for me is I get to talk to people that I've never met before. And today I'm talking with Tarah Keech. And Tarah Keech is from Mobile, Alabama, if I'm not mistaken. That's where your business is.
That's right.
And
That's where we are now.
yeah. And Tarah is a master life coach that specializes in burnout prevention and recovery. So I'm excited about this conversation because I encounter this type of stuff on a regular basis. So Tarah, thanks for being with me and provide us some color around what you do.
Oh my God, Dave, I'm glad to know you. Thank you for having me here. So I love talking about burnout. And this is probably going to be a different conversation about burnout than most of your listeners have had before. So got my master's thinking I wanted to be a therapist, had a moment of lightning bolt clarity where I knew that I didn't want to do that anymore. Wound up back in corporate after the degree. And what I kept seeing are these super high achievers who you look at them from the outside, right? And they've got every single advantage. They've got the pedigree, they've got the jobs, they've got the money, all the trappings of corporate success. But behind closed doors, they still felt really like there was a lot missing, right? There was just something they couldn't figure out. They would say, I should be a success, but I feel like I'm a failure at life. Like these big insights. And what I recognized from that perspective was that people, all of us, just don't always know how our thoughts are at play. And so what happens is we just go through life, like checking the boxes, climbing the ladder, doing all the things, and not ever feeling like we're fulfilled. And it's because we're doing things for reasons that we don't like. And that's where burnout comes from. So in my perspective and my experience and what I do with my clients, like burnout is really just a flag. Like it's your psychology telling you that it's time for a change. So Dave, tell me how have you ever felt burnout before? I've got my own experiences, but tell me.
Never. I've never felt burnout. Of course, I felt it. I would say though, more so during my younger years, I felt it. I would say I felt less burnout in the last 7.5 years than I've ever felt in my life. And without making this a story about me, what cured me, or what I feel like has cured me, is going out on my own.
Yeah.
I felt like for years and years and years trapped, completely trapped, not being able to kind of just do what I want, say what I want, deliver what I want. And I know that took a lot of my energy for a long, long time. And the money that I made never satisfied me in that capacity. So that, like, I can just, very generally speaking, I can say I was always burnt out no matter what I had, no matter what my title was, no matter how much money I had, I didn't like it. And so going out on my own kind of relieved me of that. So I'll throw it right back at you. How about
Yeah.
yourself?
So I think that's a beautiful example, right? Because I'm willing to bet, and you and I don't know each other's background very much. Like we've had a couple brief conversations, right? So I'm willing to bet that you making that transition for yourself felt more like you were able to honor what you valued most. Is that fair? Does that ring true?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So being able to be creative, have that autonomy, put what you want out in the world, like all of those things are core pillars of what matters to you, right?
Absolutely.
Load, right? Like the next thing, and then like as parents, like private school tuition or like this vacation or like all these external check marks, but we're doing it for reasons that don't feel really good. And these values that we have keep getting like suffocated or stuffed down and ignored. And so we try to buffer it with all sorts of things that human beings do so that we don't have to feel that discomfort. And what I love to share with people, and if any listener is out there going through this, I just want to like give you a high five. Like your brain is doing a really good job, even in that pain, of just letting you know that like, hey, something's not quite right. Like this is an opportunity to look at what's really going on here. So
Why
yeah.
do you think it happens?
I think it's super easy to get in that survival mode, and it's your brain doing its job, right? So I like to, can I get nerdy for a second, Dave? Is that okay?
I'll give you a free pass.
Okay. So we've got this limbic system back here, and part of your limbic system is your amygdala, which is a beautifully engineered piece of equipment that's constantly running like a fear survey. It's looking for all the reasons you should freak out. Every like corner, there's a tiger that could jump out, a cliff you could fall off, a job that could be lost. All of these things produce a constant state of fear. And it's doing its job to keep us alive. Like that's survival, right?
Mhm.
So I was taught this and I love to share it too. There's like a tripod of survival. If you can set it up, you can live. If you can avoid pain, conserve energy, and seek pleasure. Anything that threatens either of any of those three, your amygdala is going to be like danger, 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 and keep you in that rut because it's known. Even though it feels uncomfortable, you just are able to take that path because it's a known path to survival. So it gets really easy the amygdala run on its own.
Mhm.
When we talk about the brain's prefrontal cortex, that is the part of your brain that does that executive planning and the future thinking. And I know you love this too, like the strategy work that you're so good at, Dave, right? Like thinking through things with intentionality. That part of the brain requires more energy, which is a threat to your amygdala. So your amygdala wants to sort of like always be in fear mode, and your prefrontal cortex is like, no, like, dude, it's 2021.
Mhm.
Like you have all these other options. You can make plans with intention. You can think about what you value in life and make those decisions. But there's sort of like this, like you're between two riverbanks, right? Constantly being pulled on both sides. So being able to listen to your brain when it's showing you something that is a risk, and then make the decision to think with intention and follow those plans instead, is where you start to be able to have the freedom to make the choices that feel better in your life and feel more in line with your values.
How often are people making choices because of external
Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
versus like internal? There are times in our lives when we're really little that we just kind of do and say what we want. We spill orange juice on ourselves, we draw on the walls. I mean, obviously, until somebody says you can't do that anymore.
Right.
But at what point does the external world start to dictate our internal choices?
Really pretty early on. So we learn survival patterns from the very beginning. It's like, oh, this entity gives me food, right? So seeking pleasure, food feels good. It gives us dopamine, all that good stuff, right? Seeking pleasure. So almost automatically, we begin to be sensitive to those survival cues. And as we go and our brains develop, like prefrontal cortex actually doesn't really fully develop until late adolescence, early 20s for many of us. So that decision making, that critical thinking comes in a little bit later, but really from the very beginning, you're beginning to align yourself to make those decisions that help you survive. And the other cool thing about your brain is the neural networks. And I know I'm getting like super deep on some of this stuff. Sorry. I love it. If you can't tell, it's really exciting.
Keep
So
going.
your brain fires thoughts. Like the way we have thoughts is you have one neuron that sends a signal to another neuron. And what it really is like an electrical charge. I want you to think about your brain like a yard. So if you're sending a signal to this other neuron, what you're doing is like walking that path between those neurons. Literally makes a little line, like a spider silk thin line, is how I like to imagine it. The more you think that thought or that idea is reinforced or you prove yourself right, that path gets taken again. So eventually, the term is entrenchment. There's literally a trench between those two neurons that's deeper and wider, that makes it easier for you to see evidence of that thought, makes it easier for your brain to take that path. So those automatic programming, like you learn early on as a kid, like, oh, this person, like grandma gives me cookies, I'm going to go to grandma for a cookie, versus like, oh, if I draw on the wall, I'm going to get like a consequence, right?
Right.
So your brain is building those patterns from the very beginning.
At what point is it our responsibility to recognize that the thought is just a thought? It doesn't make it real, or it doesn't make it valid.
I don't know that we're ever taught that. I feel really privileged that I was able to go to school and learn some of this and get my own coaching that helped me really like apply it. But many of us don't recognize the difference between what I refer to as a circumstance or a thought. So in the coaching model I use, it's circumstance is the data point, right? Like it's 56 degrees outside, traffic is this volume per rate of speed. Like those are data points. So and so said these words. That's a circumstance. They're neutral. Circumstances don't mean anything until we assign a thought to them, Dave.
Right.
And that's where our feelings come from that drive our actions and create our results.
So we all have thoughts, whether we want to have them or not. Valid, invalid, ridiculous, insane. We all
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And why is it that some people live in pure reaction to their thoughts, and other people can step back and say, just a stupid thought I had. You know what I mean? Like, how does that happen? How often are you encountering people that live in pure reaction to what they think is actually happening?
Oh my God, we all do that. And you know, what's funny is I have and psychologists and psychiatrists even, and they know these things. Like they know how the brain works. They could list for me the chemical interactions that are happening all the time. But applying this to real life is where like the higher level of growth can happen. When you're able to do that and separate the circumstance from the thought and intentionally reinforce the thoughts that serve you to create the result you want, like that's the magic. That feels like magic to me, right? But it takes effort, it takes consistency, it takes support and training and practice. For my own life, that's what it took. That was the formula for me, and that's what I do with my coaching clients.
You love it then, right?
I really do, because it's powerful, right? Yeah, it's super fun.
Well, you've got this background in clinical psychology, which to me sounds much more important than coaching. And I'm not diminishing myself or you.
Yeah.
But like to me, I feel like, oh, I'm talking to a doctor right now who said, I don't want to be a doctor, I want to be a coach.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to use a lot of what you learned. Aren't you still a clinical psychologist at some level?
No, I'm not a psychologist. And actually, what didn't work for me, first of all, let me say this: I have deep and profound respect and love for the science and study of psychology and for the work that psychologists and therapists and psychiatrists and counselors do. Like, there is absolutely a deep need for that work.
Yep.
What I wanted to focus on was the future and solution focused, where the science of psychology is based, is typically and traditionally faced in a disease model and reflective more than proactive. Now, there are emerging fields of psychology. Positive psychology is doing some really rad stuff. Like cognitive behavioral therapy is where my models and training are based in. I just really wanted to do that forward focused work. That was more about creating more of what you want than fixing what's broken.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but you have to look at what's broken too. And that's where like paying attention to those, you mentioned it a minute ago, like those deep thoughts, like those crazy thoughts that come up. And I'm not saying crazy derogatorily, but we all know like we can catch ourselves when something's not quite making sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Looking at those thoughts tells us how to readjust so that we can, with intention, create what we really want.
So I want to take this in two directions based on what you said. There's that whole medical side of things, the psychology side of things, and dwelling on the disease and what's wrong. And sitting in my seat, I mean, obviously there are things that go wrong in everyone's life. There are things that go wrong in the world. We don't always get what we want. We get hurt. We die. People get sick. All sorts of stuff. But I feel a sense of responsibility when I'm talking to anybody, my family, my friends, my clients, that I feel like by allowing people not to necessarily stop feeling what's not right, but to let them sit in that situation forever is totally irresponsible. And that's my own judgment on it. And I say that from the perspective of, I've had, people in my life who spent their entire lifetime in going to psychologists and therapists, medicated, not getting any better. As a matter of fact, like eroding as the years went on, because they were allowed to kind of just dwell on what's wrong and carry it as a, look, this is what I have wrong with me. So, that's just the way it is. And I feel like even though I don't have the background of a psychologist, I feel like it's my responsibility to help the people in my life recognize what hasn't worked. And if they're open to it, move through it.
Right.
What's your take on that?
Yeah, I feel really strongly, and I have examples in my own life and some clients of mine that have gone through that also. So where I think the need is, and this is where I sort of feel like my mission, right? Like having negative spectrum thoughts and negative spectrum emotions is part of our human experience, and it's part of how we're equipped to survive and to like evolve and thrive.
Yep.
Where we need more help is making sure that people know that it's okay to feel negative feelings. All of your emotions are survivable. They're all tools. And when there is disease present and when there's a need for treatment and intervention, like there are helpful resources. I'm really encouraged. There's a trend where there's a more integrative approach between the psychological science and treatment work and coaching, where working together is a possibility for people that are open to it. And we're seeing really good results from that too in recent literature. So I think it's both. Where I really want people to grow into is allowing the humanness of the negative experiences and letting that be okay and learning from that. It's important to pay attention to it, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to learn, like, okay, there was an experience and this is how my brain helped me survive. These are the thought patterns that I got from that experience. These are the emotions that are coming up. Learning how to name our emotions is another big piece of the work that we do, right? It's so easy to just stuff them down or ignore them or buffer them. And when I say buffer, I mean like substance use or overspending or scrolling social or pounding Chardonnay alone at home at night, like it's whatever it takes so that we don't have to feel those feelings. Until we're willing to look at the feelings and process them, we'll keep having to encounter that lesson until we learn it. Right. So that's what I see with a lot of my clients. And I know you see this sometimes too with the work that you do. Like they just feel like they're beating their head against the wall. Right. It's because there's deeper work to do. Like you're ready to grow when that's your experience of stuckness.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what about your take on just coaches in general? I've got my opinions. Um,
Yeah.
well,
Well,
here's why I bring it up. Here's why I bring it up. There are a lot of people that do what I do.
yeah.
A lot of leadership coaches that focus on sales and management and business development and organizational communication. There's a ton of us, just like there's a ton of life coaches too. And some of them are excellent, and some of them are terrible. And I can't stand it. I don't like seeing it. And I'm just curious to get your take, because I think you have a deeper understanding maybe than most, given your background. How often are you competing? Maybe not competing. How often are you running up against or seeing coaches out there? They got a certificate, and all of a sudden they know what you know. Do you see that, or am I being difficult?
So let's talk about your thoughts on that, Dave. Do you want to look at your thoughts
I
there?
get pissed off. I get pissed off.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of coaches out there that are a disaster themselves, and they're trying to, you know.
Why is that? Why is that important to you?
Well, I think I feel responsible. The reality is I feel responsible. If somebody's going to hire me to, help them recognize or move through something,
Yeah.
I feel at some level I have to have demonstrated the ability to do that, more than just my words, more than just, my wife and I were talking. We talk every morning. I always get her into these deep conversations, and it drives her crazy. But like I took this course in college, and I don't remember the name of the course, but the professor at one point said, look, just because somebody with absolutely no credibility could make a statement that's accurate, and we can't diminish the accuracy of the statement or the validity of the statement just because they don't have credibility. And that's where I struggle, because I think to myself, if you have a background, if there's evidence of experience or being genuine, then there's more validity to the coaching. If it's just words because you heard the words or read them in a book or parroted what somebody else said, there's no depth. There's no authenticity to that.
Yeah.
And so that's where I struggle. Is I've bumped up against coaches in the past who are just parrots, and there's no experience. So how do you help people beyond those words? I'm rambling, but I see it on a regular basis.
So you're right. Coaching is currently an unregulated industry. It's a wide open field for people, like you said, wanting to hang up a shingle and just like help save the world, right? So there's a couple of different ways to think about it, and I'm going to share my thoughts in a second, but I'm going to use the thought model to look at what your experience is right now. So circumstances, you're a coach and you're working with clients, trying to make a difference in the world, helping them have their businesses thrive, having fulfillment in their careers. Like that's the work you do, right, Dave?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So the thought that you have when you see other coaches is these guys don't know what they're talking about, like how some sort of level of like skepticism or incredulity, and then when you have those thoughts, you're feeling like defensive or competitiveness or like justice, right? Like you want justice for your clients. You want them, because you have your client's heart
Yes.
at the center of everything you do. That's the value you have, is helping your clients.
Right.
So you feel defensive and kind of upset about it, right? Like there's some degree of upset.
Yes.
You feel defensive and upset. How do you respond typically?
That's a good question. How do I respond? I think I just say it.
Yeah.
I say it. I'm critical and I become judgmental.
Yeah. How does that pan out for you? Like, what result does that create for you?
Fantastic. People love it. People love it.
Okay, so you were a good sport there, and I'm not trying to like
No, 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 no.
to show you how our thoughts work, right? So
Yeah,
it's for me, and I've had to do this too, and I have to do this on myself, and I see this with clients too who struggle with self-doubt or imposter syndrome when they have the credibility, they have the credentials, and they still feel like they're not quite enough, right? So I just want to show everybody how this works. So it feels better to me to have a different set of thoughts, and I only choose them, Dave, because it feels better and that helps me do what my work better, like stay in
yeah.
my lane better. So when I hit this, and I do, and I get angry, and I get like empathetically hurt for people that are hurt by people that aren't doing their work well, I have to do forgiveness. And it feels better when I'm in that state of saying, like, okay, so this coach is out there and they don't know what they're doing, or this client had this experience. It's not my experience to have. Like, that client's hurt is their experience. That other person's insufficiency or insecurity isn't mine. What is mine is to do my work and show up in the best possible way. And the way that I know how to do that is to keep my thoughts really clean. So I choose to think thoughts like, I'm glad that coach is exploring like what they want to do in the world. And I also know this, like, people attract who they're meant to serve,
Right.
and people who are attracted to that kind of person aren't my client. Like, I work with people who are mission driven and heart centered and frankly really smart, like the best at what they do. Like, those are my people. Everybody else, like, I'm glad to share. I love doing podcasts. I love writing. I have a weekly newsletter. Like, that is out there for anybody that happens into my realm. But
Yeah.
beyond that, it's not mine.
I love it. That's a great answer.
Yeah.
No, that's a great answer. I think that's great. So tell me more about where people now you talked initially about high achievers.
Yeah.
These are people on the surface who they look like they've got all their stuff in order. Maybe they've got a great job, they make a lot of money, they live in a beautiful house, they got the perfect family, whatever that is. But you're actually identifying them as the people feeling the burnout. When I would think it would be at times the opposite end, the person who doesn't have any of those things, who's just struggling through life.
Yeah.
You're saying no, it's the person who looks like they have it all. Underneath all that, they don't feel like they do.
It's such an amazing thing, and I really hope anybody that's listening to this that's struggling with it takes home that it's a human experience, right? So it doesn't matter what's happening. The circumstance of your life isn't what determines your burnout. And we know this, like, we could look at celebrities and be like, they have everything too, but like there's people committing suicide or like self-imploding relationships, like doing all this self-harm behavior. It's not the circumstance that determines it. What I love working with is the person who knows that they have a bigger mission, like they're compelled to do the work that they're doing in the world, and they have a sphere of influence that can expand beyond where I would ever be able to reach. So like helping those people have their own confidence and security and emotional intelligence and all those beautiful gifts has the opportunity to impact the world. That lights me up. What I want the high achiever listening to know is that it's okay for your ambition to evolve. Okay? You've probably, if you're listening, you've probably done all the things. You've checked every box, and you get there and it doesn't feel like you thought it would feel. It doesn't make a difference in how you think about yourself or in the trauma or story around from your past. They're still with you. So let's work on that. Let's get your thinking really clean so that you can step into whatever you want on purpose, like
Right.
thinking on purpose for a purpose about what you want to create next.
Right.
Yeah.
When you think about a person's life, and I am sure you've noticed this over the last, probably forever, but maybe more so over the last year. I've noticed that, and I said this in a recent podcast. I've noticed that the conversations that I have with my clients today are just deeper, and I am much more aware of everything in their life without getting into all the details about it. And I find that that's where the coaching has evolved. Is it's really about the entire human being. It's rarely, and I've said this before. I coach people, some people that make just ridiculous amounts of money, who just are not happy. They have the authority. They have a company. They have, but something's missing. And sometimes it's they're not happy at home. They don't like their business partner. They're not healthy. It's something else. They don't have a good relationship with their kids. And so where do you, in your experience, do you find that the burnout is it in many areas and it's manifesting itself in one way, or is it in a single area? I mean, what do you see out there?
Man, it's been so interesting. You're right. This last year has changed the lens almost. Generalization. In previous normal life, it was easier to compartmentalize your different roles.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. This year, that compartmentalization has evaporated.
Yeah.
Like you're seeing family in the background during Zoom meetings, like there's really no escape. And like maybe your health is coming to a bigger focus in a different way. Like some of the edges have been blurred. Now, how burnout works, it's driven by the thoughts that we're having. Those automatic thoughts show up in every different relationship in every different way. And more often than not, I have people come to me because they want some professional transformation or transition, but it's always the other stuff that also changes too, or maybe often is the root cause of some of the thoughts that are happening and just showing up in the different areas. So I believe that our on every role, and this last year with those, again, like the tidy packages that we used to like be able to leave at work or like leave at home or ignore the mirror or not open the bank account statement, like all of those things have sort of blurred into one big melting pot, so it's been harder to avoid.
Right. So how do you get people to face it?
I don't. It's not my job. All my job is to help my clients and my readers look at their thoughts in a different way. Like my only job is to be a mirror for what's really going on and
Right.
to give a safe place where they can say it for the first time. And I got to tell you, Dave, like it's not always, but it's almost always in one of the first conversations we have, people cry because they'd never heard themselves say their thoughts out loud or had the place where they felt safe enough to get it out.
That,
And it's
that
when,
that that's what's amazing to me. That's what's amazing to me. We talk about this all the time at home. I'm convinced. I am 100% convinced that the problems we have, so many of the problems we have at home, at work, in our communities, schools, whatever, churches, keep going, are as a result of just things that people are holding in.
yeah.
They're not communicating what's going on inside of them. Sometimes it's because they have no idea. It's just, oh, I'm always pissed off.
Right.
Well, I have I've labeled myself as somebody that hates other people. So that's what I do. I find reasons to hate you, and that's my character.
Right.
You know,
Because that's a survival path. Because hating people, like you're still alive. So your brain thinks that that's how you survive.
right?
Yeah.
It becomes a habit. Um,
Yeah.
where am I going with this? But so we were talking this morning on the couch. I'm like, I struggle with it. Like I said, I was talking to my wife about just messaging in general, and my company and what I do is I work with people to develop confidence in their communication and finding comfort in their ability to shoot straight with other people and making it easier for other people to shoot straight with them,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So that said, when I see somebody putting up a front and act and just consistently staying behind the screen, I struggle with that. It's always there. I'm like, you're not being real.
Yeah.
You're not being real, and until you're real, I can't help you. And I wonder how many people have fallen into the habit of not just being real. What do you hold? What are you hiding from, or why have you chosen? We had a conversation. I was talking to somebody recently about marriage, and actually, my wife and I were both talking to people, and I'm like, I would do it all over again in a second. I like it, it's been like the greatest thing. And we were talking to a group, and some of the folks in the group were like, "Are you kidding me? I would never do it again." I'm like, what? I couldn't believe it. And it's just crazy to me. So like that's an example of something where, so you wouldn't do this again, but you're still doing it. So how does that impact everything else? Or you go to work every day and you just don't like your boss, or you just don't like what you do. It's draining you, but you still do it.
Yeah.
And so at what point is what we do just simply a habit, a blind habit,
Yeah.
that who's going to wake you up from it? Some people think their habits are, that's what they are. This is what life is. You're supposed to be unhappy, you
And
know
that's the real tragedy, right, Dave? Like for me, that breaks my heart. Like that, like that's optional.
right?
Please opt out of that. And so there was research. I was working with a group of physicians not that long ago, and I think it was 2017. They surveyed a big group of physicians, and something like high 70s, maybe 80% of physicians would not do it again. They were that burnt out that they would not sign up for what they're doing, but they're still showing up every day. And how does that now in our current environment trickle down to the experience of all these people who desperately need medical care? And what a tragic loss of potential for these physicians who were originally like inspired and lit up to help people heal and feel better, to have that been drowned out. So I wanted to speak to like why we do things, right? Because you mentioned that a couple times. The way that our experience works, the way that we cognitively, physically, and emotionally process things, right? We encounter a circumstance, we have a thought about it, and then we have a feeling. It is only from the feeling that human beings ever take an action. When I say action, it can be inaction or reaction. And then we get a result because we take action, we get a result. That's the math of it, right?
Mhm.
If you think about that, we only ever take an action because of how we think it's going to make us feel or how we want to avoid feeling.
Right.
If you can buy into that, that action only ever comes from a feeling, then your feelings are what determine how you're behaving. So if you see people that are holding back, like there's a feeling that they don't want to feel. There's a
Right.
feeling that's too risky, right? They're letting that amygdala take over, and your amygdala is like, oh, you feel anxious about that. And so there's probably like a tiger around the corner, or like you're going to die of disease. Like your amygdala is operating in our original programming, right? So like way back when we learned how to be afraid. But what your amygdala doesn't know and needs your prefrontal cortex to tell it, it's like, no, man, like it's okay to get up and say this, and it's a safe place. And here's all the reasons why. Like practicing that kind of intentional internal dialogue or self-coaching is where that transformation can happen. But that's why we need really good coaches in the world, Dave, like to help people understand that those feelings are survivable and that you have control thoughts to reinforce and practice and focus in on.
Under what circumstances would you call it quits with a client?
Oh, wow. So a couple, right? If you're just not really ready to take action, those, and I very rarely have had to do this. Also, I've referred people to mental health professionals and medical professionals before, where I wasn't able to support them in the way that they needed, or I saw that they were leaning towards harm to self,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So if it wasn't that extreme, like if it's not that extreme, at what point, when you say it requires action, you're a mirror. How long are you willing to be the mirror for somebody?
Doesn't feel good for me anymore, right? As long as my thinking is clean and I'm able to give them be the mirror for them, like that's a productive coaching engagement.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Understood. Understood. So tell me about the types of clients that typically, I mean, I get they can be really, really successful, but how do they engage with you in the first place? What do they say to you? Do they come find you? Do you find them?
Both. So typically it's and I'm so fortunate, right, to have been given so many referrals. It's people that know me and then refer me to somebody that they know and trust, where they feel safety in coming to me and talking about these things. Um, and I have a membership now, so it's a little bit more removed. Sometimes coaching one-on-one can be a really intense experience, and people sort of want to dip their toe in and see what this thinking about your thoughts is all about. So I found that's a good like entry point for building a relationship.
Yeah. What about burnout for yourself?
Yeah. Oh,
Where are you susceptible to it?
I love this so much. So I really do. And listen, I'm not like happy go lucky all the time. Like it's not hearts and rainbows. Like my thought drama is my thought drama. And I've been in burnout many times. I am susceptible in feeling guilty for taking time away to be with away from my kids to be with my clients and my work that I do. Right. I'm susceptible to holding resentment for things that are happening in my household with my husband, and not verbalizing it, like getting stuck in my own negative thoughts there. And when I don't do my thought work, I was just having this conversation with a client who's now actually a collaborator of mine. I was like, I was in such a funk. We actually lost our family dog
Oh, sorry.
just a couple weeks ago. And she talked to me that next week. She's like, what is going on with you? It's like, I just don't want to do my thought work. Like, I'm just going to fall apart at the seams if I think about it. And, like it took me a couple days to like sort of be in that grief spot. And then I did my thought work and it got cleaner. I'm not saying I don't feel grief because I do. It just got me cleaner. It's like, okay, now is the time for me to be present in these different ways. And like, this is the big intentional result that I want. And like, this is how I can show up today to accomplish that. So doing the thought work, when I don't do the thought work, it's a hot mess, man. Because our brains want to go to those dark, negative places.
Right. So what I'm hearing is there's no, hey, fine, hey, I got this thing under control. I'll never slip again. We're always going to slip.
Right.
We're always gonna,
And because we're designed to evolve, it's like a kid learning to walk. Like once you learn how to walk, then you have to learn how not to like fall, and you need to learn how to run rope and not break your neck. And like there's always something new and that we're meant to step into, and there's always going to be a learning curve with that. And that's been hard for me in my business too. Like, and I know your listeners are probably business oriented, right? Like learning and giving myself permission that it's a constant iteration in my business is a really perfect analogy for how our thought work goes too. Like we're constantly going to need to refine our thoughts and grow into that next level.
yeah. I mean, as I think through this, and then I can't help but to think about what has gone on in our country over the last year. This is not going to be a political statement, by the way, but I think about how hard it is. I mean, like I have the benefit, and I'm sure you to some extent might agree. I don't know, but I can pick and choose who I want to work with,
Yeah.
and they can pick and choose who if they want to work with me. But the key to being successful with anybody is that individual or that organization has to look in the mirror and say, I want something different than what I have today. And it doesn't mean what I have today is bad.
Right.
I just want something different. I want to be a stronger leader. I would like to add more value to my client base. I'd like to have better relationships within my organization.
Yep.
Whatever. I'm making stuff up right now. But they have to want something. And you use the phrase name something. And then from there, we figure out whether or not I'm the person to help them do those things. And if that's not all aligned, then I don't have to do it and they don't have to hire me. But I think about how hard it is to lead a community or to lead a state or to lead a country, when in a company, if something's not working, you can fire somebody.
Right.
You can just get rid of them.
Yep.
But in real life, you can't, because everyone still gets to stay. How do you, like, as you think about what's going on in the country or in the world, just over the last year, let alone the last, 1,000 years, how do you get everyone to start considering what's going on upstairs in a more healthy, productive way?
Well, and I think this is important no matter where you are on the political spectrum. Like there's a lot of people probably that you don't agree with. Like no matter where you are, there's a lot of people you don't agree with. So I would ask and encourage all of us to take that work internally first. Like what is the result that I want for my life and my family that I have responsibility for? Where can I take action that will create a result? Right? So because everybody else taking action isn't my responsibility. But here's what I can do. So I want you to start with your own thoughts and your own responsibility first. And then once you know the result that you want, you can think about how you want to feel and the actions that you want to take to create that result. And then it's sort of like plugging in thoughts, like again, the reverse engineering, right? Like, okay, so here's where I'm capable. And these are thoughts that serve me in creating those feelings that will fuel me to take that action and create that result. The next step, and you're having conversations with other people who may be from different opinions, right? Recognizing that they have their thoughts because their brain is helping them know that that's how they can best survive, right? Know that there are strong emotions that are driving that, and being sympathetic to that, because no matter what they believe, their brain is telling them that that's their best case for survival. So, right, giving them permission to have their feelings and thoughts. Then I would encourage curiosity in those interactions, right? Because I feel, and this is my own personal opinion and what I would do as a coach, having people articulate their thoughts and mirror those back to them. And I'm not trying to make you be a coach in your relationships, but in as much as you can say like, oh, like this is what you think and this is why you think that's important. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's how we lay the groundwork for the unity that I think we all are hungry for.
What percentage of people in your mind consider what you're saying? Awareness of
Yeah,
what?
hopefully more. Um, right. Hopefully more every day. If you ask, I don't know. I don't know. I would choose to believe it's a high number because that feels better.
It does
But
feel better. It does feel better. Like I was going back and forth with a buddy the other day, and about a situation that happened. There was an accident. And we went back and forth. And I thought, I wanted to double down and say, hey, this sucks, and it does. It really does. But on the flip side of that, I said, here's the deal: the vast majority of people in this world, in my community, are really good people.
yeah,
And we hear too much about those that aren't good or who we think aren't good. And I think that tinkers with the psyche of a lot of people.
it
And
does.
I think we have to we're too much on teams.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm a Patriots fan, and well, there's no football team in there. I mean, you've got obviously Alabama, the college team, but like if you had a professional football team, it's my team against your team, and I'm on this team, and we don't like your team, and life feels that way sometimes when you see about how people consume information and form opinions. It's this right, wrong, my team, your team, me versus you, good versus bad, and it becomes really snarly.
Well,
And
it is so easy. And again, like that, like we're wired for that. We're wired to form communities that will help protect us from other threats, including other communities. Like this is all basic evolutionary psychology stuff. I want like please give everybody permission to be a human in their own brain.
yep.
And then and then I want to be careful if anybody's listening to this and they're open, like they've made it this far, like they're open to thinking about this. I would encourage you to think about your own thoughts and the words you use. And I've got littles, right? Like I've got a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and so it's super easy in all the stories to have a good guy and a bad guy. I and this is our own choice,
Mm-hmm.
but we choose to say like that's not a bad guy, like that's the antagonist against the primary character, or like they're not a bad guy, they're just making decisions that we disagree with, or they're making bad decisions. Like
Yes.
even those words impact how we perceive everything else. So that's the power of how thoughts can weave their way into every other area. So I would just encourage anybody that's open to that to observe how they're using those classifications.
That's where I'm going with it.
Yeah.
When I think about leadership in general, in a household, in a company, politically, in a school, whatever, wherever, in order to be, the bar to get in, or to be given authority, is a low bar. I could get promoted in a company by being a total scumbag. I could be a person with questionable character. But if I'm a solid performer, well, I can be your boss. If I know the right people, I could be elected, to do this or that, or my dad did this, so therefore I'm next in line to do that. It doesn't mean I'm a good. By the way, it doesn't make me a bad person either. But the reality is it doesn't take much to be in charge. And that's if there's anything that might give me burnout, that's another thing that gives me burnout is how often in life are the wrong people leading the charge. Just that is not a political statement, by the way. This
No,
is
I get you. Yeah.
in life, and how many are confined by the good, bad, right, wrong lens.
Yeah.
And that's something that I do get concerned about, because there are times where I will feel burnout.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, I'm up against this tidal wave that isn't going to stop, and I've got to find small victories here with the people that I can influence as best I can,
Right.
and not pay attention to the wave.
the victories that are there in front of you are the only thing you can ever control.
Correct.
Right? So if you're feeling burnout about the tidal wave, it's because you're outside of the circumstance that you can impact.
Correct.
The tidal wave of other people's actions is none of your business. If you want to create a platform, let's just say, and I was talking with a client about like entering politics potentially, like potentially running in addition to her corporate career. Like if that is where you want to play and the results you want to create, then that's a different set of actions you need to be taking. Right? If you're upset because of who's elected at a higher office than you ever want to play in,
Right.
like you're choosing to feel upset for a circumstance that's completely out of your control. So that it's a choice. And I'm not saying it's easy or wrong, or I feel those things too, but it's recognizing what's a circumstance versus what's a thought and where's the result that I can create.
Absolutely. At some point, if you've agreed that you're gonna, provide value in a more defined space, you're I would think though at some level you're still, whatever value you're providing over here, there's something that could be countering that is not in your space that you've chosen not to play in,
Sure.
but that's still going to influence the work.
Well, it's your yeah, and yes, you're absolutely right. It's that becomes your circumstance that you then get to respond to.
Right. 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 Right.
And
Right.
I want to go back to that, like choosing where you want to have impact. I want I want you to do that for reasons that feel really good. Because if you're doing it out of obligation or because you feel resentment against somebody else, or you're seeking vengeance, or like you just want to make more money so that you can like what if it doesn't fulfill you or feel lit up for you, no matter what you do or how you go about doing that, it's never going to feel good. You're never going to feel fulfilled or in alignment. Do what you do for reasons that you love. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I think, and I run up against a lot of people who they initially don't think of it that way. It's they think of happiness in terms of, well, I've got to get married now. We've been dating 3 years, so now we get married. Or
Yeah.
yeah, or I went to school for this, so I have to get a job doing that. I took a job here, even though I hate it. I have to stay for X amount of years because that'll look good on the resume. Or I've got to do this because I got to pay back that. And it's like it becomes a final decision in the moment that starts to become a trap.
Yes, it does.
And then if you set multiple traps, now you're really consumed.
Right.
It's bringing what I feel like, and again, I don't necessarily do what you do, but try to shine a light on all the little possibilities that could be contributing to that lack of energy. And a lot of, I think about the relationships I have. Many of my experiences over the course of my life where I was like at my lowest are the ones that help me understand and relate to, circumstances now.
Yes.
And I'm curious about you, like if something happened in my life yesterday or last week and it's good or negative, whatever the experience was, I love sharing those things to help people relate around something. Are you only a mirror or do you share stuff too?
I love sharing just for the purpose of like humanizing this entire experience that we're all having.
Yeah.
Right. Like no, it's completely normal to feel resentment and to like want to fly off the handle and to like want to punch a wall. Like all of those are normal like human things. So I love sharing and being as transparent as possible just to make sure that everybody feels included and doesn't feel like they're the only ones that are kind of like spinning in their circles, right?
Yeah. Yeah. One other question for you. I would imagine this ties back to your purpose. And when you're not aligned with whatever your purpose is, you're more susceptible to the burnout. How many people are thinking about their purpose? I think about mine all the time.
Yeah.
Like I literally get up each day and I go back years and years and years. I want to feel like I can just be me all the time, all flaws.
Yeah.
I can be me. I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to hurt anybody, but I want to feel good just being who I am.
Right.
If I'm in a bad mood and I'm feeling cranky, I'm like, I'm just off my game today. I love being just able to say it, not pretend I'm on my game.
Yes.
So I feel like my purpose is to help people stand on their own, communicate with confidence, live a purposeful life, feeling like, hey, you know what? I can stand on my own. I can make a difference on my own. I have the tools to do that, and I have the tools to develop other people to do that. And every single day I get up, and I'm just never dreading work. I never, like I said this on a recent conversation, I just never feel like I'm working ever. It's just like this energy all the time. And yet I don't meet a lot of people who love talking about what they do. They love it maybe, in a little piece of it. They love that they make a lot of money, or they love the fact that whatever, they drive a nice car. But deep down, they're not fueled by what they do. And I wonder how many people really identify, like, this is what I'm meant to do.
Yeah.
Like with when we had kids, my wife, I've said this before, I just want confident kids. I want them to be confident adults. I want them to feel like they've got a place in the world and they belong. And it doesn't matter if you're the tallest, the shortest, the heaviest, the skinny. It doesn't matter. You belong here. You have a voice. You can stand on your own. It's like that's what I feel like I'm meant to do. And I want to help other people find that in themselves, whatever that is. My question is, because I'm rambling, is how often are people totally focused or clear about their purpose? Or they clean it up? Is it just like, well, here's my new purpose. My new purpose is this. Or is that who you are?
Right. So I think I love that we're having this conversation because I like talking about purpose a lot. And it's funny, this morning, usually in the mornings when I have breakfast with my girls, I'm like, okay, what's your intention for today? And I know they're little bitties, but like just having them practice thinking about that, right? But today, my 3-year-old, she's like, Mommy, what's your purpose today? And like, that's not the phrase that we use. It's like, oh, my purpose is to be your mom and Brian's wife, and, like to help my clients. Like, I love that she asked me that. So like permission for all the purposes, right? Your purpose could be that you're kind and let somebody cut in to traffic. Like your purpose shows up in all your different roles in every opportunity you have. I don't think it's one like heavenly moment with a ray of sunshine down on you, right? I love doing the work that I do because I feel purposeful in this work and helping people understand that they're having a human experience and that pain is just a tool. So like, let's use that and level up. That purpose in my work lights me up. Also, being a mom lights me up. Buying good food and like that's exciting to me too. Like all those different moments help me feel like I'm living fulfilled, right?
Yeah.
I want people to give themselves permission that it doesn't have to be one overarching theme. It can be, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
And it can be in every relationship and every interaction and every conversation or thing that you do. Also, it's okay that it changes, right? Like I feel like those doctors that start out and they feel really called to be healthcare providers. It's okay that it doesn't feel as good anymore later. You just need to pay attention to that pain because that pain is like your subconscious and your brain helping you figure out what you can and want to do next that will feel better.
Are you able to focus on helping people? Are you able to show them a track that they could potentially run on so that if they don't feel purpose or they don't feel or they do feel burnout, are you able to show them a mirror in some way that, hey, here are some areas to consider? Or is it just we got to figure it out? Like is it just very squishy?
Yeah, sometimes we say things that we don't recognize that we say. So that's where some of like the coaching work comes in. Like did you realize that you used this emotion word when you were talking about that? Or like looking at their face when we get to do face to face, like, oh, like you really like seem to light up. Like, is there something there? So guiding them on doing their own introspection is really powerful. I'm a big fan, and like if you guys are dealing with this right now, I'm a huge fan of pen to paper. Like I know I'm dating myself, but that's how I learned how to learn. So like if you can put your words on paper and then look at them, sometimes that's a really helpful tool. The other thing, if they're really struggling, is to think about the last time they felt good, name those emotions that felt good, and then ask themselves why that felt good, or the last time that they felt purposeful in their work. If they're talking about what they want to do with their life, I love, and this, I'm borrowing this from Simon Sinek, this isn't mine, but you ask yourself why it matters 5 times. I call it why times 5. Like, okay, Dave, you love doing what you do with your clients and helping them feel confidence. Why is that important? And then list your reason. And then like, why does that matter? What difference is that making? Along about 4 or 5, when you've asked yourself that and gone down, like you get to the nugget of what's really driving you. And when you get there, it's almost like a like a physical sensation, like a gut check, you're like, yes, like that's it. That's what you want to get to.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I've read it. I've read a few of his books. 100%. It comes down to that. And what is it that makes you tick?
Yeah.
And I bring it up because there are a lot of things that successful people do in life and unsuccessful people do, but successful people can be checking boxes, not even knowing. I mean, when I say success, I say it in quotes, not even knowing that they're not at all fulfilled.
Right.
For example, I might love exercise, but the exercise that I'm doing is burning me out. But I'm
Right.
exercising and I'm eating well, even though I do not like this food. And I've got a job, but I hate my commute. And whatever, bad analogy in the pandemic, everyone's at home. But the thing is on paper, it can look really good, but underneath it all, again, if I'm burnt out of exercise, I change it.
Yeah.
I don't do the same thing. If I'm tired of eating a certain food that's good for me, I change it.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. If I don't want to do that work anymore, I change it. If I have a disagreement with my wife, I address it
Why do you do those things? Why do you make the changes?
because I don't want to feel I don't want to feel the frustration. I
Because
know the consequences. I know
you know that it's optional. That's beautiful. Like that's the gift, right?
well, yeah, I know the consequences of ignoring a problem. And I think just coaching people, and just living my own life over the years has helped me understand the damage that can be done when we don't address what doesn't feel right.
Right.
It's, I think, just physical damage, psychological damage when you choose to ignore, avoid, dismiss what's going on inside. You're in for a world of hurt. And I see a world of hurt. The negative side of me sees a world of hurt that doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
It does not have to be that way. And I do get frustrated when I get frustrated when I see anybody or anything say that's okay, let's take care of those that are hurting and keep them hurting. It's like, no, 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 no. Let's help them not hurt. Let's help them face it
Yes.
and work through it. Why would you? I look at communities in this country who've been suffering for years and years and years, and there are people that are totally content with that suffering. No, let's keep them suffering because they'll still need us. No, let's help them. And I feel that same sense of obligation with my kids, my friends. It's like, how do I, without being a preacher, how do I help you just recognize what's going on, and then help you realize that you actually have all of the skills and tools to do something about it if you want.
That's
And
it.
if you choose not to, that's fine too.
So there's this idea that I want to talk about with you. And again, this isn't mine, but if you think about life and like the spectrum of emotion, positive-ish, negative-ish, neutral-ish, on the balance, life is about 50-50, right?
Yep.
Like on any given day, like half and half or across a span of time. So here's the beautiful thing. And I think this is what you're talking about, where the opportunity is. If you know that it's going to be about 50% negative anyway, why don't we plug into our thoughts and feelings and use that to level up, like to get to where we can go next. Like, let's see where this opportunity can take us. If you're exercising and you really hate it, like you're burnt out on it, like, great. So what is that telling you? And to look at your own thoughts because you have that experience and that's true for you. Like if you lean into that discomfort, again, being intentionally uncomfortable, then there's an opportunity to like take it to the next level, to see what can come next, what you can do in a different way that's even better, makes you stronger, faster. Like use the negative, allow it, learn from it, and then use it.
Great advice. Great advice. I've already blown through our hour of time here. So I apologize for that, but I've enjoyed the conversation. What else do you want people to know, Tarah? Anything that we didn't talk about that we should have?
Like it's okay to be human. Like
Yeah.
the whole experience, like it's there for a purpose. Your negative emotions are part of your toolkit, and that's it.
But I think we discount that whole other side of being human, like you said. Why can't every once in a while? Because I think in those moments, that's when you can face those moments, that's when you can learn.
That's it.
Acknowledge that as a learning opportunity, an awareness opportunity. And there are times I feel like we miss that as people. We try to negate that. No, 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 no. Everything's fine. And I think that's what causes a lot of our problems.
Well, because if you don't feel the feeling, then you can't process the feeling. You're going to keep having the same experience.
Right.
So feel the feeling, process it, and then you're ready for what's next.
Right. Right. All right. You get the last word.
I get the last word.
Yep.
Joy. Can joy be the word?
Well, the last sentence or the last paragraph. It doesn't have to be a word.
Yeah. So thank you, Dave. This has been awesome. If anybody, I would love to connect with all the people who this resonated with. You're probably my people. So come to tarahkeech.com, TARAHKEECH.com. There's a header at the top where you can opt into getting weekly love notes from me. It's more sort of like nerdy thought stuff. And some optional thoughts you can choose. Dave, what a joy to get to know you and be here with you. Thank you.
We'll leave it there. Thank you, Tarah.